And I think that you've offered quite a critique of globalization and the response that is in the form of nationalism, and how Muslims should be responding to this with a vision for life. And that vision for life has to be connected to our theology and to our cosmos. As we move to the question and answer period, I want to ask this one question, which is that, what is it, we are talking about knowing the purposes of the law and knowing the purposes and the intentions behind the philosophy of Islam. In your mind, what are the most important aspects of Islam, the thinking of Islam that Muslims have today, that you think need to be reformed? I want to ask that question also considering the idea of ummah, because when we're talking about globalization and nationalism, oftentimes the rhetoric of the ummah can either take on one of these forms, oftentimes in the form of a type of nationalism where Muslims first becomes the rhetoric, right? So how do we understand the notion of ummah while we're also claiming this universalism or this idea of we're all in it together?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Is that okay?
If you can hold it a little bit higher.
So let me do it as you
Yeah, maybe as I'm doing it. That would be
like this is much better. Okay. Look, the first question is an important one, and you know, at one point in my life, I wrote the book Radical Reform, and I'm explaining in the introduction of the book Radical Reform that I reached a limit, because for almost 20 years I have been involved with fiqh, Islamic law and jurisprudence, and usul al-fiqh, and trying to think about in which way we have to indulge in ijtihad, the reasoning or the autonomous creative reasoning when the texts are not clear, or the text are not clear, meaning that they are open for interpretations, or when the texts are silent. And at one point, I realized that what we have with the scholars, and especially the fuqaha, is that because of the context, and sometimes the pressure of the context, they keep on coming with answers by saying, we are in a state of necessity or in a state of imperative, so we need to find rules that are helping us to deal with the situation. And at the end, we are obsessed with the rules and we forget the goals of things. And the best example that we have is in economy. We are speaking about Islamic economy, and then get it right. We started talking about Islamic economy and we ended up talking about Islamic finance. And Islamic finance and the monetary thing is the way you deal with or accept the neoliberal thing. And what we end up doing now is Islamizing the means and not questioning the goals. So we want to do the same as the capitalist system, but we want to Islamize we want to make it halal. So we want to halalize capitalism. And no, you are laughing, but this is what we are doing in so many fields. We don't question the way we are eating meat. We want to eat meat as much as we were eating meat, but we are not questioning the whole system. And the whole system is corrupt. It's a system with treating animals with no dignity. We don't care. Just make it halal slaughtering. But what about the way we have to deal with the ethical? So this is why I started trying to reconcile 3 dimensions. The ethical, the legal, and the objective. So this is what I'm doing now with the Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics, and I'm trying to now create a movement of thought, a kind of school of thought. Not saying I want to reform Islam. Islam doesn't need reforms, but Muslims should reform the way they interpret the text. We have to reform the Muslim mind. That's the phrase I'm using. The Muslim minds, we have to reform them by questioning, saying, don't be obsessed with the rules if you don't understand that the rules are means for an end. What is the goal? What are you trying to achieve? And to get this, you need to have rules and always ask the meaning, which is the connection between the legal, the rules, and the value. The value of justice, the value of dignity. So we have to reconcile this dimension. We as Muslims, we are saying we don't want fragmented knowledge, but what we have today is fragmented knowledge, and we are obsessed with the roots, and we are not reconnecting and having this. So what I'm trying to do now is really to deal with this, and what we are missing now is also scholars, and this is something that I explain in the book, which is bringing together scholars of the text and scholars of the context. I want the people who are dealing with the text to be able to deal with people who have expertise as medical doctor, as physician. As, for example, I don't want the ulama to tell us what is halal and haram without even knowing what we are talking about in economy, or in arts, or in media. So I brought once, we had a seminar where we have artists dealing with some of the scholars. And you can see the level. The artists are dealing with, for example, somebody telling you, in fact, from the Islamic perspective, it's only what is, the only thing which is good, or the only beauty that we have is something which is good. As if something which is not good cannot be beautiful. For any artist, when you say something like this, what are you talking about? What is this? This is an ethical projection onto something which is not the reality of culture today. Today you can make it beautiful, something which is in itself ethically bad. It's ethically bad, but it's beautiful. So what I'm going to say, haram? How are you going to deal with this? You need to have artists coming from within and questioning and having something which is coming from within. You can't just come with a legal framework and say halal, haram, halal, haram. This is very simplistic. It's not going to work like this. We are lacking this. So what I'm trying to do now is to have this movement of thought. We have scholars, and I'm trying to get three audiences. Scholars at the highest level, students, and we have now a network. We have, for example, every year we have summer schools where I'm bringing 50 students coming from all over the world in Grenada, 1 week, and we are training them to get a methodology. To try to all what I was saying here about the cosmology, about the principles, about the fundamentals, and then you come with questioning and applied ethics, for example, in your field. Whatever you do, you need to have an ethical background, an ethical take on everything that you do. This is spirituality. Once again, I keep on repeating this for all the people who say, you know, I need a spiritual life, and the spiritual life means that I'm not committed within my society. No, spirituality is not to look for meaning away from the world, is to bring meaning everywhere in the world. It's the other way around. So you come and you bring meaning in everything you do, whatever your job, there should be an ethical thing. So this is one. The second question that, I want to have people, and I have more and more now, even in the United States, who we have a Facebook, we have a website, we are trying to connect the people, and I want the people to understand, don't wait for a charismatic leader, a charismatic scholar to tell you what is Islamically right or wrong. In your field, you have to do the job. Now it's the time for average Muslims to understand that they have a responsibility to be involved in the discussion in their field, at their level, to come with the critical questions. What is going to change the ulama is the quality of the questions asked to the ulama. Not only by waiting for the leader and say, where is the leader that I'm going to follow? For before being a follower, try to be a leader. Try to do the job and try to be involved in your level. The second question was about
the concept of ummah.
Yes, the concept of ummah is important because we have to in the book that is going to be published it's already there in the UK, but it's going to come Oxford University Press in September. I am taking the notion of ummah to try to explain that ummah is something which is important in Islam. There is the spiritual dimension of ummah, that there is the spiritual communion, that we are brothers and sisters in Islam, means that we are sharing something which is a spiritual communion to us. And this is something that we have to experience. This is why wherever you go, when you go to the pilgrimage, when you visit another country, there is something which is a spiritual communion. You have to keep this there. The problem that it's sometimes we confuse this belonging to the spiritual community to something which is my brothers and sisters, wherever they are, I'm going to support them, and sometimes we are supporting them even if they are wrong. So this wrong understanding of the ummah is problematic. And there is another wrong understanding, is that we speak about the ummah, but we end up being very nationalistic. We deal with our country, and we don't care about what is happening to the ummah, so the Muslims who are oppressed, but also to the human beings who are oppressed around the world. So it's shameful. It's shameful when I was banned from this country for 6 years. for two reasons. The first one is to say what you are doing in Iraq is wrong. And the second was your policy and your support of Israel without acknowledging the rights of the Palestinians is wrong. And I was bad. And then they tried to say, because I gave money, and then it was wrong because I gave the money after the organization was black listed, and it was completely silly. But I got the message that they don't want us to speak the truth. They don't want us at least to bear witness to the message of justice here. When I came, what was shameful is have Muslim organizations asking me not to speak about Palestine, not to speak about the oppressed, not to speak about the reality. Don't just speak about, the connection with Allah. So this new type of tasawwuf, which is called apolitical, but it is deeply political because it's trying to be apolitical. Now my question as a witness, is it right for me? For me, for example, I'm the son of political exile. Is it right ethically for me to come and to be a citizen, to be in security in my country, and to keep quiet about the injustices that people are dealing with in the global south? Is it right? Is this what I'm bringing to this society? No. I'm bringing to the society the opposite of what humanity should be. If there is something which has a meaning in my life, if I came out of discrimination, oppression, repression, is to come here and say, I'm not going to keep quiet. I'm going with wisdom, with patience, with commitment to speak the truth. That's the point of our relationship to the Ummah, and also to understand something that we very often speak about the Ummah, but we only care about our people. So look at what I was saying about the Ummah. For example, your community. What is your community in the United States? The Muslim community in the United States. They are not only the migrants. They are not only the Bangladeshi. They are not only the Turkish. They are not only no, they are all the people. Why is it that we are reproducing after 4, 5 generations exactly the same fragmentation based on our national belonging? How is it that we are creating mosques where we are only black people, mosques where there are only people coming from Pakistan or Asian countries? How is it? What is wrong with our mind? In fact, it means that our culture is more important than our religious principle. So we are recreating this. And you say, you know what? We are all brothers and sisters, but some brothers are more brothers than others. And add to this, the fact that if you look at the social status, it's unacceptable. I'm sorry to see people buying the American dream. The way they talk about black American Muslims is second-class Muslims, and it's patronizing. It's even telling them, all this, buying all the rhetoric coming from the government about these people are just drug dealers, they are not educated. How come you just reproduce the discourse coming from the government and targeting the people, and you are not dignified enough? So I would say, I would like a deeper understanding of what it means to have this spiritual commitment to the Ummah. By our Ummah, it's an Ummah of principles. It's not an Ummah of blood. And our faith is based on principles.
Okay, so speaking of Ummah and universalism, we're going to be tribal for one moment. And we're going to ask if there are any Princeton University students or faculty or staff who have a question to begin. Going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay, mix it all in. Great. Okay. Oh, okay, Sadaf, yes, please kick it off.
Thank you so much for such a powerful and moving talk. I am a postdoc here, and I'm writing a book on Indian Muslim secular thought. And I had a question about a sense of ownership and belonging in these stable Western democracies for Muslims. And I was wondering if there's a gap in Muslims buying into this idea that the West, that we aren't a part of the West, that somehow the heritage of secularism, for example, is purely somehow Western and hasn't been influenced by, global intellectual history, and, for example, the way in which, Europeans learned from the Mughal court in India and its ability to have people of different religions there. So I was wondering if there could be some understanding of global history that would help Muslims feel more of a sense of belonging and an interconnectedness and moving away from this idea of isolated civilization. Thank you.
That's an important question. This morning I was in Colombia and I was addressing exactly this this issue. Because, yes, I think that when I was talking about education and when I was talking about the way, for example, the West, or in the West, we are creating or defining what is our civilization versus, once again, what is not. So there is something which, what I call colonizing, the colonization of history and memory. By saying this is specifically Western. In philosophy, even in the question of secular, because we are talking about secularization and the secular process and secularization process in India, for example. If you look at, and that's the problem that we have with Muslims, is that they don't know their history. There is one philosopher, there are many, but there is one philosopher who wrote about thinking in the Middle Ages. And saying, you know what, that this separation of authority came to Christianity through the Muslims in Spain. So the idea that in Islam we are confusing authority is not right. Because if you come back to the Prophet, peace be upon him, what he was when he was dealing with the Quran, the people were saying, is it coming from the Quran? If it's coming from the Quran, it's the Quran. So if it's coming from God, it's God. But if it's your opinion, for example, what happened in Badr, for example, one of the companions coming and saying, is it coming from you? Or is it a revelation? He said, no, it's coming from you, so it's wrong. So he was questioning his authority as a human being, not questioning his authority as the messenger. And this is part of what we have even in our legal tradition. So I would say that this perception that what is coming from the West is alien to what is part of the Islamic tradition, and more than that, not knowing that the Western culture, the Western civilization, the Western values, the Western thought is full of Islamic contribution. It's not only Judeo-Christian, it's Judeo-Christian and Islamic. And at the same time, it's not understanding that we, in our tradition, in the Mu'tazila, in the Falasifa, we have lots of things coming from the West. The Greek philosophy was so much in Islamic setting and circles that somebody like Ibn Taymiyyah in the 13th and 13th century was saying we have to resist the Greek logic in our. So he was understanding that it was already there. And what is very interesting is that he was reacting to something which is very interesting, is to reduce the Greek tradition to Aristotle and the principle of no contradiction. Not to take from the Greek what was coming from Heraclius, talking about the movement, that the principle of contradiction could happen. Because in Islam, when it comes to the legal, at the same place, but not for the same people, at the same time, you can have two different legal opinions that are both right, but not the same. So it's against the principles of no contradiction in Aristotelian terms. So this is something that we don't get. Why? Because we don't know our history. We are not studying, and we accept too quickly the fact that there are two entities, and one against the other. So what your question invites us to do is to get a deeper understanding of our own history and the connections and the dialogue that we have between civilizations, cultures, and thoughts, which is important.
We have a question right over here.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Naimia, and the young lady, she asked an excellent question and you gave an excellent answer. But there are so many things that you touched in your lecture, and if I try to pinpoint each one of those, it's going to take a lot of time. But I'm just going to start with this thing. The political ideal of Islam consists in the creation of a people born of a free fusion of all races and nationalities.
Can you speak in the mic because I can't
Yeah,
hear you?
okay. I think it's going to take a lot of time if I'm going to touch on everything which you talked about. You talked about fear, you talked about isolation, you talked about nationality, you talked about identity, you talked about...
I talk too much.
And I'd like to talk a lot, but I'm not going to take a lot of time over here. I just want to say over here that I just want to quote from Iqbal. He says that the political ideal of Islam consists in the creation of a people born of a free fusion of all races and nationalities. That's what Iqbal talked about in the political thoughts in Islam. Now, my question is that you just now talked about the fusion of past into present. And when you talk about the globalization, I would like, and you mentioned about Michel Foucault also, as you started. In that context, in globalization, in touch with our taking our past into consideration from Avicenna, Averroes, and I do understand that you are referring to Al-Ghazali, in my opinion, when you just mentioned about talking against the Greek philosophy. So the question is that how do the Muslim second teacher, Al-Farabi, and his influence on Descartes and Heidegger, and then led to the Renaissance and the modernization, and that modernization led into what we call the postmodern era now. And Michel Foucault was big on this esteem, the theory of esteem. How do you put that thing into perspective, all these things together into the globalization?
Wow.
Very loaded question, though. I can make it more loaded.
I'm ready to stay until tomorrow. So I'm not sure that I understood all the dimensions, but I got from what you're saying. First, I wouldn't go that way when it comes to the connection that we have with, for example, modern thoughts and the very deep philosophical Islamic tradition. Because in fact, I don't agree with the categorization that was proposed by Orientalists. When they were saying, in fact, when we deal with philosophy in Islam, we deal with al-falasifa, and falasifa is in Arabic, it's the transliteration of philosophy. So falasifa, and saying, in fact, the philosophers in Islam and the great Muslim philosophers, it's Al-Farabi, it's Al-Kindi, it's Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, and this tradition of people, or Miskawe, who took from the Greek, and they were the first interpreters of Aristotle, and the post-Aristotelian and post-Platonian thoughts. I think that this is reducing philosophy in the Islamic tradition, because in fact, even in the other trends, what we call, and very often we talk about al-mutakallimun, and we say al-mutakallimun were theologians. And you will see this in my books. I don't translate al-mutakallimun as theologians. I say philosophers and theologians, because they were philosophers. And we are reducing philosophy in Islam, mirroring the philosophy that we have in the Greek tradition or in the Western tradition. More than that, when today we are talking about al-fuqaha, the jurists, for example, we are talking about them as jurists and only this. But if you look at, for example, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, if you look at even Ibn Taymiyyah or al-Shatibi, if you come from an Islamic perspective, you say fuqaha, jurists. But in fact, if you go deep in what they are saying, they are philosophers. They are coming with a philosophy of law. And how are you going to call Ibn Taymiyyah writing 9 volumes on al-naql wal-aql, which is the revelation and reason? They are philosophers. So we cannot reduce philosophy. And the problem is that in our tradition, we're so scared of philosophy that we ended up saying, no philosophy at all, it's only about rules. And this is the way. And I think that this is completely wrong. We need to reconcile our understanding of our tradition, not by accepting the categorization of knowledge coming from another tradition, but reconciling the means of our tradition with what I call a philosophy of life. And on this, the one who had this intuition, at one point, talking to Renan, the French philosopher, was Al-Afghani. Al-Afghani had a very interesting saying when he was referring to, say, in fact, coming from the Quran, there is a philosophy of life. So don't tell me that my revelation is against philosophy. My revelation is producing a philosophy. It's a system of values that is there. What I have to do is the human agency should extract from the text this, what I call the cosmology. We are scared and sometimes we are reducing. And my last point on postmodernism is, if you look at, and this is why you have people resisting, and what, for example, Lyotard, as the one who was producing postmodernism, was saying, in fact, postmodernism is attacking two concepts. The concept of truth and the concept of the real. In fact, there is no truth. Everything is relative, and everything could be discussed. This is the postmodern approach. And the real, there is nothing like the real. Real is a projection. In fact, the real is a construction coming from your own perception. In Islam, the very important resistance here is to say, no, truth is true. So when the people are attacking Tawheed, or even attacking the Quran, you have to be very careful, because here it's a take on where does lie truth in the whole process. And the real, when the people are saying the real is no real anymore, there is no reality, there is no real, everything can be deconstructed, the main resistance here is to come with a clear philosophical, spiritual answer by saying the real is real. So we are not going to accept this deconstruction, because this deconstruction, this fragmentation of everything, this is where the starting point of deconstructing the truth is going to happen. So this is where we have to be resistant. If we don't come with this, you know what is happening today is that we have Muslims not being involved in this discussion, and other Muslims buying everything which is coming from the postmodern approach. By saying the Quran, oh, it might not be the word of God. Now it's interpretation, it's ilham, it's not the very word of God. So they are questioning the fundamental of al-aqidah. And we are not part of the discussion, and we don't take it seriously, this attack against the real. And you know what? If you come back to the harmony of the Islamic terminology, they say al-Khaliq, the creator, created al-Khalq, the creation, and he's asking human beings to deal with akhlaq. It's exactly the same word. Khaliq, khalq, akhlaq. And the way the nature is dealing with the instincts of the animal, the human being should deal with akhlaq. This is the way they are in harmony. And to have akhlaq, you need the truth and you need the real. If you akhlaq being the ethical values, it's the good behavior, the good manner based on ethical values. So if you don't get this, there will be no akhlaq without the truth, and the truth is al-khalq. And the real is what? Al-khalq. No akhlaq without khalq coming from al-khalq. The terminology of Islam is more powerful than what we are doing. What I'm talking about now, philosophy.
No, thank you so much.
I'm sorry that we have to conclude on that point.
I just want to say this thing, the thing which you mentioned about like making kosher everything, like halal and all that thing, that leads me to that Machiavelli kind of a thing.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that we've run out of time. It's 9 o'clock now. I thank you so much, Dr. Ramadan, for coming. One last question?
Yeah.
Okay, then you have to choose, because I don't want that burden on me. Okay, we'll ask this sister in the back, over here. Yeah. And as the mic is coming and we receive the last question, I'm going to ask that after the answer to the last question, I'm going to please ask everyone to remain seated as Dr. Ramadan exits the stage. I know that a lot of you want to meet him. We also have to respect his time and also his energy, given that he has a very hectic travel schedule. So thank you so much for cooperating in advance.
That's a nice way of saying I'm escaping.
Okay, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Ramadan. Thank you so much for being here. I think we all benefited a lot from your words. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on Muslims that choose to work for the U.S. government with intentions of improving the condition of the Ummah. You know, despite the fact that they will likely have to compromise their ethics in the process and be complicit with a system that has historically and continually oppressed Muslims domestically and abroad.
What is the question? That's an important one. Now, if we have to be consistent with some of the principles. If we say now that we belong to this country, that we are Americans or Canadians or whatever, and at one point dealing with this country or being a member or feeling or having the sense of belonging, you should be able to work at different levels, and you should be able to work within the government. I would say three things that are important. In the way we are dealing with an ethical, in the way we are trying to be ethical in our behavior, there are three things that are the starting point. The first step is, whatever you do, Allah yuhibbu idha amala ahadukum amala an yutqina. God loves when you do something, to do it in the best way. So you need to have competence. So if you go to work with the government, in this very specific job, competence is necessary. Second is integrity, to be upright. So to be ethical in what we are doing. And third is accountability. So you do something and you are accountable, you are coming back, and I would say that this is the starting point, in fact, of everything. Even if you go for electing somebody and voting, don't ask if he or she is Muslim. Ask if he is competent or she is competent, upright, and accountable. Because you may have Muslims not competent, not upright, and not accountable. So if you have to, so this is when you are entering into a job within the government. The second thing which is important, not to ask yourself if you are going to serve the Ummah. You have to serve humanity. خَيْرُكُمْ أَنْفَعُكُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. The best among you is the more useful for humanity, all human beings. So I'm not going to try to serve only the Muslims. I'm going to try to serve my country, the human beings, based on what? Principles, not on interests. I cannot be utilitarianist in the way I'm dealing with this. I have to serve humanity on ethical terms. It's good ethically for my people, my country, not against the dignity of others. So at one point you have to decide if what you are doing is serving humanity. Now, nothing in life is black and white. There is nothing like this. Everything in our life, sometimes love could be white, okay? And it's good. But life is great, you know? And you have to, this is why we have something called, in the legal tradition, fiqh al-awlawiyat, the priority. So you have to balance and to try to say, am I going to be more useful here? Can I influence in one way or another? Can I bring something? Can I contribute? And if you can do something which is positive, even though you know that there are many things that you might not really agree with, it's a question of balancing. Our life is like this. وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانَ. When set the balance with equity and don't lose the balance. This is what you have to do. It's always like this. So when you deal with the government, of course, there are things within the government, some decisions that you are not going to agree with, and some policies that you are not approving. But at one point within the government, your input, and you have to assess your input on ethical terms. Am I doing something that is useful? Am I going to deal with this? There are some things that sometimes you can say, I don't want to be involved in this. So the idea that you should not be involved in the government only because by the simple fact that it's the government is not going to work. We need to have people there who are more, if no one is going to get there and we are letting the corrupt people to be there, it's going to be a corrupt system by definition. So you have to decide in which way. At one point, if in the specific field you are, you feel that what you are doing is against humanity, against dignity, and you cannot just accept what is done through you, this is why you have to take a decision. And you can't just say, you know what, that's okay, I'm an American citizen. If your citizenship is bringing you to act against your values, you are in danger. No. I have a personal fatwa about clapping. But that's essential. Every one of us should ask himself or herself this question. If at one point, what am I doing in this job, within the government, is making me instrumental in promoting something which is undignified, I better stop. If I can choose to do things that are specific, and here I can be useful, I do it. But once again, all the people are telling you, don't deal with the government, don't deal with the army, don't deal with the economy, don't deal with finance. And then at the end, what I'm going to do is everything is haram. So you end up, I don't know, football, soccer, journalism. It's not going to work. We need to have ethical person. So I would say that the only fact that you are asking this question, that you want to be ethical in the field, this is very positive. But mind you, be careful. By not being connected with ethical people, you can end up forgetting your values. By the fact that you are used to a way of, this evolution of being in a job, that you get used to things to the point that you don't even realize that it might be bad. That's the most dangerous thing. So it's always good to, you know how it is called in the mystical tradition, in the Islamic tradition, the spiritual tradition, is renew your intention. Tajdid al-niyyah. Every time, ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? What I'm trying to get? Are you going to try to get a position, a salary? Are you really trying to serve? And please, you can be sitting now here, and all of us, and we are always very quick to be convinced that we are serving, but sometimes we are serving ourselves more than serving humanity. And I would say that this is where it's important in the way. The ethical awareness is something which is very complicated in everything. In the work that we are doing with scholars, the ethical concern is it's very demanding. It's something that you have to ask every step. What am I doing? What I'm doing, and what are the result, and what is going to be the consequence of what I'm doing. These are very important questions. And just to end, because this is the end, please, all of you who are dealing with ethical concern in the work that you are doing at the social level, at the cultural level, because I am very much, I keep on repeating to Muslims, if you don't take culture seriously, if you don't take art seriously, creativity seriously, we are going to be lost. It's not going to work. The power of the cultural presence in our life, day in, day out, in the way we speak, in the music around us, in movies around us, all this is very powerful. If you don't take this with an ethical concern, you are going to be lost and to be creative. So all of you, all those who have this ethical concern, please try to be connected. We are trying, really serious, at the grassroots level, to have a movement of thought, a school of thought, of people trying to be involved in their field with this ethical concern, applied ethics. we are working in 12 fields. You can find this on Facebook, on my website. I'm trying to get scholars, students, and average people to be involved. I'm fed up of all these Muslims sitting down and criticizing all the scholars by saying they don't get it, but we don't have you. If you are not involved, stop. You know what? If you are not involved, just shut up. Shut up. Don't criticize the scholars, because you have the scholars you deserve if you are not involved in the critical discussion. And it's a question of authority. It's a question of power. It's a question of commitment. Where you are going to be you will have power. You are going to work on something. And this is why we want you to be accountable. And the first accountability is towards your own self. How are you going to serve this country? At the highest level in the government, the best human being is the one who keeps in mind the fact that he is serving average citizens in all what you are doing. And this is the way you are pleasing the only one, by being involved in all what we are doing and in the way we are doing it in ethical terms. So please try to be committed and try to be involved in this discussion at your level. Thank you.
Dr. Ramadan, on behalf of the Muslim Life Program at Princeton University, I'd like to thank you so much for coming and sharing with us your thoughts. And I hope that you can come again very soon and that this conversation continues to happen. For all of you who have come out, I want to thank you so much for coming on this Thursday evening. Please do keep in touch with the program by sharing your email so we can keep you abreast of all of the programs that we have organized for April and beyond. I'm not sure what that is, so I'm sorry.